Two demand side policies so far. We've finished fiscal, we've done monetary, we are doing the last one now, is exchange rates. So, exchange rate policy primarily targets the exponential component of AD, right? Thus making it a demand management policy as well. And is the last of the three. Now, just to back out a little bit, if you think about demand side policies, the more correct split is like that, right? So you've got fiscal, and then you've got monetary, and then monetary can either go into exchange rate or interest rate. Okay? And monetary policy is under the purview of the central bank. So actually monetary policy is a general term for both exchange rate and interest rate policy, but kind of by default, if we say monetary policy without specifying, it typically refers to interest rates. Because most developed countries in the world use interest rate policy as their choice of monetary policy tool. Singapore is an exception. Singapore uses exchange rate policy, and this is why this makes exchange rate policy actually quite important, in fact more important than interest rate policy, because they test you Singapore or not. So whenever you get a Singapore essay, you don't talk about interest rate policy or really talk about this. Okay, because they expect you to know. Cool. So this part's just a quick recap. We actually already did this when we did BOP, so I'm not going to waste too much time. Just quick notes again about how to label the diagram and so on. So always just remember, right, your demand and supply and your quantity axis just kind of follows whatever market you're drawing for. So this is the market for, this is obviously going to be the market for USD, right? I made a special point about this as well because a lot of people find it confusing. Like, how do you know which one is on the left, which one's on the right? So I taught you back then that the slash should be read as per, so SGD per USD. And obviously that's consistent with the fact that this is the market for USD, much like the market for cars, right? If you got a price there, it's dollar per car, right? $10,000 per car. So whatever is the market, that is per whatever thing it is. So this is the price of US dollar in Singapore dollar, that's the diagram, that's the setup. For the supply and demand of money, right, I told you that there's just basically three general categories. You got the goods and services one. This one is related to the investments one, which includes hot money, that's why I mentioned interest rates. But it can really include anything from FDI and portfolio investments, etc. Right, and lastly, the last group of people buying and selling the currency will be speculators. So people that want to buy your currency for goods and services, for investments and speculation, right? And then the supply will be the opposite. You'll be people who want to sell US dollar to either buy goods and services abroad, invest abroad, or again speculating on the US dollar, right? One of the key things I told you was that they like to test you exchange rate policy by not necessarily asking for the diagram that they want the currency for. Meaning, for example, they can ask you using the diagram from the market for USD, show whether Singapore dollar is appreciated or depreciated. So they can ask you for the other currency pair, right? The one that's on the other side of the equation, but they ask you for this diagram instead. So the very important result I taught you is, in this particular case, for example, demand USD is actually equals to supply of SGD, and supply USD equals to demand for SGD, right? And vice versa. So I taught you back then, I think that you need to be comfortable drawing the diagrams interchangeably. In other words, okay, quick illustration, if let's say in the market for SGD, okay, I tell you that there's a rise in demand. Okay? If it's in the market for SGD, there's a rise in demand, for example, because there's a rise in demand for Singapore exports. Then you must be able to draw the equivalent thing in the market for USD, right, and tell me how it looks like. So if demand for SGD is rising, the equivalent is that the supply of USD must be rising. Okay? How do you know that? A couple of ways. One is you memorize that. Right? The other thing is you want to try to understand, right? Why does this have to be consistent? It's because if people are buying Sing dollar, and we're talking about USD versus Sing dollar, then people are obviously giving up American dollars, right, US dollars, in order to get the Sing dollar. Right, that's the intuition behind it. People want to give up more USD, get more Sing dollar, and buy more Singapore exports. There are a couple of sanity checks you can do as well. The first one has to do with the quantity. The quantities must obviously move in the same direction. Right, more of the currency being traded means more of the other currency must be being traded as well. There's more money changing hands. Right, so they need to move in the same direction. The other sanity check is here. Right, this is an appreciation of the SGD, which means that there must be a corresponding depreciation in the American dollar, right, US dollar. I don't know why I keep saying that. What the hell is the American dollar? US dollar, right? So why one appreciation must mean depreciation in the other? Because currency is not like other goods and services. You express them in a pair, right? It's the value of one in terms of the other. So if Singapore dollar is appreciating, Singapore dollar is getting more valuable, that means the US dollar is getting relatively less valuable. Okay? So there's a couple of sanity checks. Useful to start with the intuition, right? Always ask yourself, what does it mean if I have more demand for Sing dollar? That means I'm holding US dollar now, I want to give it up and get Sing. Right? So it must mean that the supply of US dollars must be going up. So like in case study, for 4 marks, it's not uncommon for them to mess with you. They could ask you to draw this, and they could ask you to draw the market for USD and ask you, tell me what happened to Singapore dollar. Right, so you must realize the depreciation in the USD means Sing dollar has appreciated. So that's the way they can mess with you. They can mess with you in the diagrams as well. They give you a diagram for USD and they ask you what happened to Sing dollar. Right, they can give you the time series chart, how the US dollar changed over time, and they ask you for the other currency. So you must be very strong. The understanding must be very clear, right? And it all starts from this over here. You gotta understand that really well. Question? Okay, now for this equilibrium, this is kind of like the step 3 of the price adjustment process. Right, so just pay some attention to it. You ever only really need to talk about it like a part A essay. Right? In a part A essay, or if they somehow ask a very simple exchange rate question for 4 marks in a CSQ and they give you a factor and they ask you how it affects exchange rates. But this is like the price adjustment process, right? So for example, if we talk about the surplus scenario where exchange rate is above equilibrium, then you just say more people willing to give up US dollar for Sing than there are people willing to receive US dollar for Sing dollar. Right, so there will be a downward pressure on the exchange rate because people wanting to sell US dollars have to lower how much they are asking for it. It's just like cutting price to clear surplus like that. It's the same. Right, so in this case, the seller is the seller of US dollar, then they just have to cut how much Sing dollars they are asking for. Right, so that will be a fall in price of the USD. Conversely, if there were a shortage, then people will be bidding up the price of the currency. Right, so there's not enough, people will offer more to get their hands on the US dollar, and that bids up the value of the US dollar. Okay, so it's quite simple, price adjustment process. Okay, straight out of demand and supply, there's nothing new there. Cool. Okay, that's all for the overview. We're gonna jump into the more critical bit. Okay. Now the main system of interest is the one in the middle. This is the one that Singapore's adopt. But I'll just very quickly talk about the other two, which we have kind of covered under DOP already. Okay? Floating exchange rate system is the easiest, right? This is simply no central bank intervention. So this is what will happen when you choose interest rate as your monetary policy. Okay? Later on, Have I talked about this yet? Okay, let me just talk about this now. There's this thing called, have I talked about trilemma? You heard me talk about trilemma? Okay, so you know the word dilemma, right? Dilemma is truth. You're caught in a situation where you can't make a decision between two things. A trilemma is three. So what's the trilemma? Right? Every country faces a trilemma when it comes to monetary policy. There are three things, okay, three decisions you can make about monetary policy. You have free capital flow. You have a fixed exchange rate system, and monetary policy in terms of being able to set interest rates. Okay? So three things. The trilemma rule is that you can only choose 2 out of 3. You can't choose all. I'll tell you why in a bit, okay? But the rule is that you can only choose 2 out of 3. That's what makes it a trilemma. So most developed countries around the world all choose this, right? In Singapore, you have a lot of foreigners here. They can open bank accounts, they can move money here, they can buy real estate. You can do the same in the US, you can do the same in Australia, in New Zealand, in London, in Paris, in Hong Kong, around the world. Right, so the developed world is very connected in terms of free capital flow. Money can flow easily in and out for the purpose of commerce, for the purposes of investment. Now, because most developed countries choose this, they are forced to choose only either a fixed exchange rate system or choose to set their own interest rates. Right, so most developed countries will choose this, and hence they'll allow their exchange rates to float in the process. But Singapore chooses this and allows the interest rate to float instead. So the question is, why must you choose only one over the other? And the answer has to do with hot money. Because this is how interest rates and exchange rates are interrelated. For example, if you raise interest rates, right, you must accept that your exchange rate will appreciate. If you raise interest rates, hot money flows into your country, which means the demand for your currency will rise, which means that your currency will appreciate. So you cannot simultaneously want to maintain your exchange rates and want to raise interest rates in the process. Because hot money flows in, it will drive up the demand for your currency. Make sense? Right? So you cannot control both. Controlling one inevitably means you must let the other one react to it. Well, if you want to maintain your exchange rate and raise interest rates in the process, you can. But you have to stop free capital flows so that hot money will come in. Then you can maintain both. Okay, so there's a reciprocal explanation for this. It's called a trilemma. That's kind of how it works. There's an essay down the road that we'll do where I'll ask you like why some countries choose interest rate over exchange rates. In there, I'll talk a little bit more about the trilemma, about how to explain it. But technically it's not something that's very in the syllabus. You just have to be able to mention it in passing, like 3 lines, 4 lines kind of thing. That the trilemma exists, what the 3 legs of the trilemma ask, and what you have to choose. That's it. And the mechanics for why you have to choose either, you actually know. It has to do with hot money. Simple as that. Okay? So my example was, if you raise interest rates, then hot money will inflow and your currency will increase in demand, right? So you'll appreciate. The flip side, right, is let's say you want to depreciate your currency. So you do it by increasing supply and printing more money. Right? What happens to your interest rate? It will go down. Right? You print more money, you increase the supply of currency in the market, there will be more of your money floating around, there will be more loanable funds. Right? So your interest rate will go down. So they work both ways. It has to do with the hot money and the central bank's actions of intervening in the exchange rate market and how much of your currency is flowing around. Right? So they are not independent of one another. That's why there's a trilemma. They are related. Okay? Cool? So that's why I say when you choose interest rates as a monetary policy, it will be floating. Okay? It will be floating. Demand and supply will determine your exchange rates, right? Just like for the US, for the UK, EU, Japan, all of them choose monetary policy, so they float their exchange rate. Cool? Now, fixed system, we talked about this as well. I taught you about how to intervene. The key, remember, is that you can only either increase demand or increase supply. You increase demand, you buy your own currency. You increase supply, you sell. This is to keep your exchange rate up. This is to keep your exchange rate down. Okay, that's the fixed system. The major implication as to why I taught you this back then was to tell you that with a fixed exchange rate system, you have extra issues on your balance of payments. right? You have extra issues in the balance of payments because under a fixed system, your BOP is not self-corrected. Right, your BP is no longer self-correcting. There is an official financing account, which means that there's financing related issues if you have a CA deficit. Right, that was why we learned the fixed exchange rate system as a contrast, right, with the floating system. The BOP is just balanced overall. The current account has still been deficit, the financial account has still been surplus. It's just that overall it's balanced. So whether you're fixed or floating, right, you can still have current account deficit issues. It's just that the nature of the issue will be slightly different, right? Because in this case, the central bank has to get involved to create their balance. So the government might have to borrow money or they have to spend money to shore up your currency to establish your BOP equilibrium. Right? So that is something, if you can't really remember, it's exactly what BOP. Right? So we're recapping down the road, but if you can't remember, that's what you need to look at. Go back and revise your BOP. So that's a major difference. Okay, so now having done this too, managed float sits in between both of them. Okay? Managed float sits in between. So the name tells you that it's floating but it's managed. How to manage? You have a band. Right? You have a upper bound and a lower bound. So instead of managing your currency at one level, we manage it within a range. Right? You manage it within a band. The way you manage it is exactly the same as how you manage a fixed system. Except that you don't have to intervene all the time. You intervene when the fluctuations exceeds your band. If it goes above the upper bound, you bring it back down. If it goes below the lower bound, you bring it back down. Okay, but the system is very much like a fixed exchange rate system. It's just that instead of one point, you make it a band. Any idea why? You wanna make a guess? Why would Singapore choose a managed float over a fixed system? You want to guess? So let's know why this is important. We're going to go back to the Asian financial crisis. Okay? So you see, a lot of young countries, right, back in the 90s era, found it very attractive to use exchange rate systems, right, as their choice of monetary policy, because you could actually control your exchange rate in order to create a very large current account deficit. You could over-consume for a very long period of time by keeping your exchange rate artificially high. So you can fix your exchange rate to be very strong, you can buy imports very cheaply, right? Then you enjoy a very high quality of living. Make sense? Right? Because you can afford imports. Now here's the problem, that cannot last indefinitely. Current account deficits puts pressure on your exchange rate. So what does that mean? Remember, in your current account deficit, you got a fixed exchange rate system, your government have to keep financing the deficit, right? They need to keep buying up your currency to prop it up. So here's the problem, right? When speculators know what peg you are using, they can attack your currency. They can guess, okay, if the government has only $500 billion left to defend their currency with, right? If I put $1 trillion, for example, or like hundreds of billions in money to go and try to short your currency, to short the currency, to short something, like you can short any asset class. To short means you sell it and then you buy back at a lower price. Okay, that means you expect the price to drop. So today, if I sell this bottle for $10 and I buy it back at $2, I effectively made $8, correct? So what you can do the same thing for currencies, right? So you will attract speculators to try to attack your currency. They will keep selling your currency, keep selling your currency. Hopefully your government, your central bank runs out of money and then the currency will collapse. Then I'll make a lot of money in the process because the currency becomes cheaper. Right? That's what a speculative attack looks like. So it wasn't just Southeast Asian countries that got hit. Famously, the Bank of England got hit. If you're curious, go and read about this guy called George Soros. So George Soros, I think, made $1 billion betting that the Bank of England didn't have enough money to defend the pound. So they used to have a fixed exchange rate system also in England, like years ago. I think this was easily 60, 70 years ago. Right? So he broke the Bank of England, who then used a fixed exchange rate system. So they ran out of cash, they had to devalue the currency. So George Soros made a ton of money from that. So
it's not illegal?
It's not illegal. It's totally legal to go and try to break a central bank, but think about how much money you need. Right? So it wasn't a small bet. Of course, if he got it wrong, he was on the hook for billions of dollars also. So it's not illegal. But countries wisened up, right? So most countries now, they stay away from using a fixed system and they went towards interest rate system. The countries that remain that actually do it will tend to do a managed float like Singapore. Why? Because the bands are not disclosed. You don't have to, you see when you fix a currency, right, everyone has to know what a fix is, correct? So for example, one of the currencies, remaining currencies in the world that has a fix is Hong Kong. Hong Kong fixed their currency in the US dollar. I can't remember the level, but it's 6 point something. So it has to be a known number, right? Because you go to a money changer, you change Hong Kong dollar for USD, you need to know what rate to use. But because Singapore uses a managed float, right, they will secretly manage the currency within the band. So people can probably guess where the band is, but no one really knows where the band is. So it makes it hard for speculators to attack the currency. Right, because if you get it wrong, you see, if you keep shorting, right, you're risking a certain amount of money. You're betting that the central bank doesn't have money. But if you get the lower band wrong, you could short, but the central bank doesn't intervene, it doesn't cost them anything, right, then your plan will fail. As opposed to knowing where the peg is, and you can calculate how much it takes to break the central bank. You can't do the same under a managed float system. So the way the Singapore Central Bank runs the Singapore dollar is we have a band, we don't disclose it, right, and the central bank will manage the currency within the band. So one major advantage of a managed float system is that there's no speculative attack. So the beauty is that this sits very nicely in between the two systems. You see, in a fixed system, it's very tiring, right? You've got to manage your currency all the time. Whether it's in a surplus or a shortage, right? You've got to keep intervening in the market to ensure that your market is at equilibrium. But in a managed float, you don't have to. It's part free market, it's part managed. So it's not so taxing in terms of managing the balance of payments. Okay?
So how does Hong Kong do it?
How does Hong Kong do what? As in the fixed system, is it?
Like, you're not getting attacked.
Hong Kong is a financial center. So there's a lot of, like, their fund flows daily will be in the maybe hundreds of billions. So it's very hard for you to attack their currency because the natural fund flow into Hong Kong will prop up the currency for you. You get what I mean? You don't have to rely just on the central bank, right? Because at the same time, you have a fixed system, doesn't mean the central bank is the only one buying and selling. There is market activity. The central bank's job is to make sure that the demand and supply in the market always kind of keeps it at that level. So you're only worried of speculative attack if your currency is under a downward pressure. There is no one to buy. You see, because if your currency is facing upward pressure under a fixed system, right, it's actually good for you. You will intervene to accumulate foreign exchange reserves, correct? As your demand for your currency rise, you'll be selling your own currency into the market to keep it at a fixed level. So you'll be accumulating foreign exchange. So as long as the demand for your currency is robust, you will never have a fear that your currency will crack. And Hong Kong is a major financial center in the world. So a lot of people are pouring money in Hong Kong on a daily basis for stocks, for bonds, for investing, to buy real estate and so on. So that level of demand just kind of keeps it there. I mean, you don't need to worry about speculative attacks. The problem during the Asian financial crisis was that all the countries that created were like Malaysia, Thailand, they had huge current account deficits, economies weren't doing well, they didn't have that much money, lack FDI, people don't really want to invest there. So the underlying demand for their currency wasn't strong. So they're very vulnerable. Right, so Singapore, very smart as an extra layer of defense, on top of having managed float, we are also a major financial center in the world. Singapore dollar is super stable, right? Then attracts a lot of investments, so that helps to keep the currency stable on top of any government action that's required. So that's how Hong Kong does it, generally. Okay, so when it comes to the managed float system, we want to go into a bit more detail. Because when it comes to exchange rate policy, I need to explain to you how to be expansionary and contractionary, right? So simply, when your currency appreciates, right, this is contractionary. If it depreciates, it's generally expansionary, correct? You depreciate, your X minus M will go up. You appreciate, your X minus M will go down. Make sense? Your currency more expensive, X minus M goes down. People buy less of your stuff. And vice versa. I'll repeat this over the next page, okay? But just for reference, how do we appreciate and depreciate? Very simple. We move the band up or down. Okay? We move the range that the central bank will intervene in. Now, what important thing you need to understand about moving the range is that moving the range doesn't actually need the central bank to do anything. They just need to decide that they are allowing for a higher range, and until the market moves it there, there's actually nothing to do. Unless the market is, let's say, below your range now, then you need to intervene to bring it up. Right, but half the time, changing the range might mean you don't have to do anything, you're just changing the range that you're intervening. Makes sense, you're changing your threshold, you're saying, oh, I'm going to intervene within this range. So your currency could be, let's say the Sing dollar over time, right, it's moving like that. So originally your band was here. Right? Then later you decide to move your band up. You don't have to do anything, right? It's still comfortably in the band. You only intervene when it moves out of the band. Okay? That's what I mean by you might not actually have to do anything. Okay? And even if, let's say the current levels are like below the band, you move your band, market forces bring it up, also okay. So natural gives you a lot of flexibility. Right? Your job is just to watch, is it in my band or out of my band? Out of my band, then I intervene. Within my band, then I just let it be. Right? So the central bank will change their trajectory depending on whether they want to contract or expand the economy. Okay? Questions? No? This range is not super important. You just need to understand how it works because you never have to talk a lot about this. The important bit comes behind. Okay? The important bit comes here. So this is super important, especially the box on the left. If you get the box on the left, you will get the box on the right. Okay, so box on the left first. Effects on AD and SRAS. Now, primarily, like I said, exchange rate is a demand side policy. So let's talk about this first. Okay, I need this phrase. Okay, when the exchange rate changes, the prices of exports in foreign currency and the price of imports in domestic currency changes. Changing the quantity demanded for exports and imports, which will in turn affect export revenue and import expenditure and change AD. Now, of course, if we are talking about appreciation or depreciation specifically, then you tweak it slightly. Right? What do I mean? For example, when the exchange rate increases, okay, let's say appreciate, right? P of X is more expensive in foreign currency, while PM is cheaper in domestic currency. Right? PX is more expensive in foreign, PM is cheaper in domestic. Right? So what happens is that this will result in a fall in demand for exports, and here will be a rise in demand for imports. Right? So the in between is the elaboration will be like, oh, more foreigners will switch away from buying your exports. Then here is locals will switch from domestic to relatively cheaper. Right, so that's the elaboration that you can give to add more rigor to your answer, to your explanation. Right, PX is more expensive in foreign currency, so more foreigners will switch away from buying your exports. PM is cheaper in domestic currency, so locals will switch from domestic to relatively cheaper imports. Right, so this is how you'll be contractionary. Okay, AD will fall in the process. Questions? Right? So I need the mechanics of this. Whenever you talk about exchange rates, right? The key phrases is change in foreign currency, change in domestic currency, how do consumers behave, and then what's the impact on X and M, and then X minus M will shift, AD will shift, so on and so forth. So although in principle exchange rate policy, more foreigners will switch away from buying X, and locals will switch from domestic to relatively cheaper M. Okay, so as I was saying, although in principle exchange rate policy is a demand side policy, but there is an undeniable supply side impact as well, which is on the cost of imported raw material. So actually in practice, when you change your exchange rate, there are two forces at play. There's an impact on AD and there's an impact on SRAS. Right? So like appreciation, very simple. If you appreciate, then by right your SRAS will increase, as it will shift downwards because of a fall in imported cost of raw materials. So this will happen alongside whatever we described here. Now there's something very important to take note of. Right? When you write essays, you need to mention both. Generally. Okay? What do I mean by generally? Because most of the time it will be about Singapore. And Singapore will experience both effects. Okay? Unless the situation or the question just calls for one. Okay, then you just focus on one. Now the thing to keep in mind is that what you need to decide is overall what shifts more. Right? Both AD and SRAS are shifting. So the question is overall what shifts more? Overall what shifts more? So how to decide? Okay, the way to decide is you need to consider the nature of the economy. Specifically, you need to care about degree of import dependence for raw materials. Okay, you need to care about the degree of import dependence for raw materials. Okay, degree of import dependence on raw materials. So I'm going to illustrate to you what I mean by this. Okay, I'm going to tell you what Singapore does as far as the exchange rate policy goes. I'm going to repeat it again when we do the Singapore notes, but I think it's good to give you a heads up. Singapore's exchange rate strategy actually works like that. We have what we call a gradually appreciating strategy. So MAS over the decades, right, only has one role over the long term. They will keep strengthening the Sing dollar over time. They will keep raising the bands over time. Right, that's our objective. We keep raising the bands over time. We keep wanting our economy, our currency to strengthen. Obviously, that's not possible if our economy sucks. Right? If you don't want to invest here, don't want to put money here, there's no way you can along the appreciation path. Correct? You don't have that much money to keep pumping and raising the currency over time. So of course, alongside that, we try to make ourselves an investment hub, a financial hub. We make people want to come here to spend money, invest here, right? Open Shake Shack here, and make people queue 2 hours to eat Shake Shack, that kind of stuff. You know what Shake Shack is? Changi Jewel. Go check it out. It's really good.
They haven't opened yet, huh?
They haven't?
I went there
Where
yesterday.
they open?
They haven't opened yet.
A&W is the one that opened. People queue 2 hours for that, right? That was nuts. I cannot imagine Shake Shack's queue. Because even when Shake Shack opened in London, right, it was nuts. Like, people queue like hell for it. Because it's an American brand, it's not a British brand.
But apparently it costs like in the US, right, the product will be 7 plus SGD, but here they're selling for 9 plus. People don't buy it.
It's like that because I mean labor, rental and all that. But the one you really should try is this thing called burger and lobster.
Oh.
You heard burger and lobster? If you've ever been to London and you had burger and lobster, you'll die for it here. Genting has one, Singapore doesn't have one. So this is going to be the first. But that one's probably worth eating.
Do people queue like mad for the Pokemon store?
Yeah, I know. Now that's one thing I cannot understand. Like, what can you buy there? Just plushies, right?
No, it's merchandise and it's a Pokestop and it's the first one that's outside of the gym.
Right, yeah, I never understood the fascination of Pokemon Center. Okay, so anyway, gradually appreciating currency, right? So as what I was saying was, it wasn't just on the monetary side, right? The government tries to make Singapore an attractive destination for many things as well, to kind of keep the currency strengthening over time. So the question is why though? Because this is contractionary, right? So why the hell do we do it? Why does a gradually appreciating currency make sense? What about depreciation? Why does we depreciate? Now, if I show you what this looks like diagrammatically, then you'll understand why we do it. Because remember I told you that there's two opposing forces? So here's the thing, right? You might feel that, hey, you know, it's a big issue, right? That AD is falling when you appreciate your currency. But Singapore has something else going for them, which is this impact is likely to be massive, right? Way bigger than the impact over here. Such that when you appreciate, I might move along here, right? Temporarily lose some output because I'm more expensive in foreign currency, but in the process, I can offset that loss because this will translate into lower rate of inflation from cheaper raw materials. And that could more than offset my increase in exchange rate. Because don't forget, the price that the foreigner will pay is a function of the price of my thing and the exchange rate. So if the raise in exchange rate can be more than offset by the cheaper selling price of the thing to begin with, then I don't really have an issue. Right? You see what I'm going at? So the key phrase that we always use is that Singapore's exports has high import content. And that makes a lot of sense because if you think about our major export industries, one is the oil related ones, you've got pharmaceuticals, and you have semiconductors. We don't produce any of the raw materials here. We got a massive oil trade, right? I only learned this from my oil trader friends recently. Like, Singapore is the market maker for oil in the region. So although Indonesia has oil, Malaysia has oil, Brunei has oil, Singapore is the trading hub. When you can't get rid of the oil, you sell it here. We're the oil trading hub. We have all the refinery on Jurong Island with a massive oil business here. All the oil majors, all the big oil companies, your Shell and your Chevron, your Exxon and all that are all in Singapore. So we are a major oil player in the region. So people will send their crude oil here, we'll refine and then we'll sell it on. So obviously you can imagine crude oil is a very big portion of the production cost of refined petroleum or diesel and so on. Right? So high import content. Pharma is the same. Right? Pharmaceutical raw materials we have none. Right? Literally all these things are chemical compounds or naturally occurring or whatever. We just do the manufacturing here. So again, that's a big issue. And lastly, semiconductors, again, we have no silicon, we have nothing. Right? We don't have copper, we don't have anything. Everything is imported and made here. Because we have the technology to do it, right? We have the people who do it, so we do the manufacturing here, but we don't have any of the raw materials. So you can see that imports have a massive impact on how much our exports will cost, simply because of how much imported inputs we actually use. So this is the reason why we go for a gradually appreciating exchange rate over time, because don't forget, our raw material costs will also go up as our trading partners get wealthier, right? Their economy grow, their GPL will go up. So this is also a function of us needing to offset that. Right, we need to offset that. Offset the fact that things will get more expensive over time if we do not strengthen our currency in the process. Lastly, the modest fall in demand can be explained away by the fact that we expect only a small decline in DX. And that can also be explained by elasticity. Okay? So the extent that your demand for your exports will fall when there's actually an appreciation also depends on what kind of things you sell, right? If we are selling refined oil, then we don't really have an issue. People are still going to buy petroleum, right? Whether it's like 5% more expensive or not. You expect it to be relatively price inelastic. So if I were to put the two things together, Singapore would be high M dependence plus high M content plus generally PED less than 1. Right, we tried. The PED less than 1 part is kind of getting diluted over time. So Singapore was in a lot stronger position maybe 30 years ago. Right, in the region, we're probably one of the strongest in high-end manufacturing, in tourism, right, in medi-tourism and all those stuff, but that gap is closing. For starters, I think China has more theme park than like the US already, right, so why we have US as one, right? Increasingly in the region, you talk about tourism, more Chinese people are going to Bali, they're going to Philippines, Boracay, right, Maldives and all that. So these people are coming out in terms of tourism, right? And then in terms of manufacturing, we no longer are the only one producing pharmaceuticals and all that, right? Other countries, as the workforce matures, they get more highly skilled, there's more investment, there's more technology, they can catch up. So our argument is generally we try to specialize our economy into areas where PED is less than 1, right? You don't do agriculture and all that because there's really no advantage one, right? It's highly substitutable, you know, it's very interchangeable. So you want to go into high value added stuff, right? That's why we want to do all the tech stuff now, like fintech is a big thing, right? They want to be a tech hub, they want Grab to be here, we got Garena, we got Razer, we got all the different, they're trying to gather all the tech companies here as well. Because that's high value added exports, right? To try to keep that in place so that even if you appreciate, you do not see a big decline in X. So,
What's the one next one?
so generally, PED is the one. Right, so of course, if you're not like Singapore, if you do not have high import dependence and high import content, then an appreciating strategy makes absolutely no sense. Okay? Now, having said this, take note, it doesn't mean that in your essay, you cannot say that Singapore will depreciate. Don't get me wrong, theory is theory. This is for evaluation. This is to guide you and tell you what your end goal must be. But if you're writing an essay that asks you to discuss whether fiscal policy is the best way for Singapore to get out of a recession, your answer would be, yes, fiscal policy is good, no, it's not good. You could depreciate your currency as well. Here's the problem, here's other solutions, evaluate. And it's in the evaluation where you see what Singapore really does. So here's the thing, in actual recessions when we actually do need to jumpstart the economy, we don't actually appreciate. The central bank will simply keep the band in place, they just wouldn't raise it. And they allow the currency to weaken naturally based on market forces. Okay, so we'll never deliberately depreciate. That's in practice. Now my point is, everything I teach you theoretically is relevant. Using your essays, you're allowed to say depreciate. I'm giving you insight from the evaluation. Okay, we'll revisit this again when we do the Singapore notes. Alright, so always remember, two pieces. Just like 2 weeks back when we did interest rate policy, I told you, there's always the direct, right, which is what cost of borrowing, all that, and then there's the hot money angle. So the rigor is important. You leave it out, it's going to be quite catastrophic. Okay, if you get this, then linking to macro goals is quite a piece of cake, right? Growth, inflation, and employment. Firstly, growth, very simple, primarily affected through X minus M. Okay? One specific point is this, potential growth could be affected if your exchange rate is too weak, right? Your exchange rate every week is depreciated a lot, and because of that, you cannot afford to import necessary capital goods for growth. But that's a very niche scenario, right? Most of the time, growth is very simple. It changes with X minus M, and to some extent with SRAS as well. Okay? Unemployment mainly affects cyclical unemployment, long-term overvaluation of your currency. That means if your currency stays too strong or too long, right, whether is it because of a managed float or a fixed system or whatever, it could cause structural unemployment because of the persistent weakness in your export industries. Okay? Will lead to shutdown. Alright? Lastly, inflation, it can affect both demand pull and cost push inflation. So exchange rate policy is fantastic for combating inflation. It's also why Singapore uses it as our primary monetary tool. Because we are very export and import dependent, our major inflation risk comes from X and M. So you use exchange rate policy is a very good double-edged sword. Right? It will help you with demand pull coming from exports, it will help you with cost push coming from imports. Sometimes even simultaneously. Okay? Effects on balance of payments. Okay, you can devalue or depreciate to correct the BOP deficit. Alright? Now, there's two things here. These two things have economic names, so obviously they're really important. Okay? First one is called the Marshall-Lerner condition. The good news is that I only need you to be able to state it, I don't need you to be able to explain why it has to work. So the Marshall-Lerner condition is very simple. The condition itself is this. If this condition holds, that means if this condition is true, when you depreciate, your current account will improve. If not, you will worsen. Okay? Same goes when talking about AD shifting. When you depreciate, if you want your X minus M to rise, you need a Marshall-Lerner condition to hold. Okay, so all you need to be able to do is to say what the condition is and say that it needs to hold for your X minus M to rise. That's all. You don't even need to justify why. Because the proof is all math. There's no way you can explain it. If you want a hint, it has to do with PAD, obviously. It has to do with the way total revenue on exports and total expenditure on imports will change, right, when their respective prices change, and how it will affect the net export revenue. And so you have a knock-on effect on AD and current account, right? But the actual proving is way beyond your scope, so you don't need to know. You just that's its origins, so you just need to know the state it. Now the one that you need to be able to explain a little bit more is the second one called the J curve. So the J curve is called the J curve because the curve is really J-shaped. Okay, it looks like this. This axis is BOP. This is surplus, zero, negative. Specifically, we're talking about the current account. This axis is time. Okay? So we start with the deficit. So the argument is this. When you depreciate, okay? When you depreciate, you will worsen the deficit in the short run. And after a time t star, your BOP will start improving. Okay? Give some time, you can take it down. What it says is that when you depreciate or devalue your currency, actually in the short term, your current account will worsen. Why? The argument is that during this time frame, your Marshall-Lerner condition won't hold. I will go into why later, okay? I'll tell you why about, but just observe what the diagram says. So the diagram says to you that in the short run, because your Marshall-Lerner condition won't hold, right? It will worsen first before it actually improves. Okay? Here's the problem. You don't know where T star is. Right? And remember that a current account deficit has a lot of bad things associated with it, correct? Long-term depreciation pressure on the currency, your country might go bankrupt, right? Because you've got no money to borrow to pump out your currency, your debt repayment is really hard. So here's the catch. If you find yourself in a balance of payments deficit on the current account, and you want to depreciate to solve your problem, you might go through a few months or even 3 years more pain. That's the significance. That's a limitation of the policy, right? Because you might not be able to survive time 0 to time t star. Right? So the point is unknown. We don't know where this t star is. The argument is that in the short term it will worsen. The question is, if you depreciate and you have a problem, can you withstand the short term? So of course the smart thing to do is don't wait until things become dire before you try to fix the problem. Right? You want to try to fix it in advance. But this shows, illustrates a limitation, right, of the policy. Now why might Marshall-Lerner condition not hold in the short term? Very simple. The biggest explanation is contractual rigidities. Because contractual rigidities will make PED for both X and M highly inelastic. What do I mean? See, we're talking about trade. And the way trade works is not like, oh, you know, today I want to buy one iPhone, then Apple ships one iPhone to Singapore. Right? Export shipments and all that are done in advance. This is how Apple can launch the phone in New York and then maybe like 2 days later launch it in Singapore. The things are already pre-shipped, right? Waiting in the Apple stores around the world to be launched almost simultaneously. So the thing about export and import agreements are that they are agreed in advance, weeks if not months, at certain fixed exchange rates. Right, because you want to like, hey, today I agree to buy this amount of stock from you, and 3 weeks later the exchange rate is different. Then I have to pay you more, right? So you want to lock it in. You will agree, okay, in 3 months, I'm going to buy this shipment of iPhones from you at what price, at what exchange rate, and how many am I buying. So even the exchange rate changes today, I can't change my order. That extends the short-term contractual rigidity. Because PED and X&M is likely to be highly inelastic in the short term. So your Marshall-Lerner conditions are likely to hold. In other words, when you depreciate or you devalue in the short term, your current account will worsen because of the contractual rigidity. Okay? So that's one major reason as to why a Marshall-Lerner condition might not hold in the short term. Then if you want to revalue or appreciate the correct BOP surplus, the converse is also true. There's a reverse J-curve effect. So it's exactly the same diagram but a mirror image, vertically. Okay, the Marshall-Lerner condition also needs to hold for the appreciation to help to correct the BOP surplus. Okay, questions? If not, then page 12. So this page, the most important thing is the left side. The right side you can pretty much derive yourself using your macro goals knowledge. The key is to understand how your AD and AS change. Okay. Last page of exchange rate policies. Okay. 5 limitations. 1, 2. This 2 is kind of high. Okay. 4 is a very generic one that's applicable across all goals anyway. So as usual, the one with names are the most important. Okay. So the first limitation of exchange rate policy is the Marshall-Lerner condition. If the Marshall-Lerner condition does not hold, AD will not behave in a way that you expect it to. You will depreciate and it wouldn't rise. You will depreciate and your current account will get worse instead of getting better. Okay, so the first biggest limitation is that you need your Marshall-Lerner condition to hold. The second limitation, as I just explained to you, has to do with the J-curve, right? So again, the question is, can you withstand this worsening? You don't know how long that is. You don't know how bad it will worsen. Right? So the J-curve effect is relevant when your Marshall-Lerner condition does not hold in the short term. So that will result in the exchange rate policy worsening things, right, rather than improving things in the short term. Number 3, availability of foreign exchange reserves. This is more right, this is primarily, it's more one-sided. It's not an issue if your currency is very strong. It's more an issue when your currency is weak and it needs to be propped up. Right? So the key argument here is of course not, right? Right? Government needing to spend money to prop up your own currency creates an out cost. You could have used the money for something else. Right? But instead you're forced to spend it to prop up your currency. So that's one limitation. The second aspect, of course, is that if you have to borrow to prop up your currency, then you have debt repayment costs. Right? Your money has to go towards repaying your debt, and again that creates an out cost because the money could have been better spent in other areas. Number 4, conflict with other goals. That's quite easy, right? I mean that applies to any macro goal, any macro policy really. You raise AD, you're going to trade off on inflation. You want a low rate of unemployment, you trade off inflation. You want high growth, you trade off on BOP. Okay, so it's quite a normal point. And lastly, time lag. So the time lag here is very similar to interest rate policy. So the time lag doesn't happen because it takes a long time to implement, but it takes a very long time to take effect. So contractual rigidity is one explanation as to why there might be a lot of time lag. Right? People cannot react immediately just because your exchange rate changes. Just because your exchange rate weakens doesn't mean suddenly there will be a surge in exports. Right? It'll take time. Okay? Questions? Good. If not, move on to the last one, then we will finish up. You can down through the last few pages first. That's the last policy we're going through. Of the demand side policies. Now we're going to do the last one, which is supply side policy. So as the name suggests, obviously everything before was targeting AD. This is going to be targeting AS, right? So supply side policies are primarily designed to target LRAS, but to some extent there can be some SRAS impact also. Okay, so over on the right hand side, if we go through this list, you will see some that says SRAS and LRAS, some will say one, some will say both. Now, one thing to take note, which is all the schools, most JCs cannot agree on this. Okay, so every school is going to give you a different version as to what can be shipped according to what the policy is. So my general rule of thumb is very simple, right? Generally, everything just be LRAS centric, because that one most schools can agree. Most schools disagree on what can affect SRAS and what cannot. So whatever I teach you, don't worry first, you understand it first and then you just apply within the context of whatever your school notes say. But as usual, the rule is if you follow mine for A's it's fine, but I can't control what your teacher demands. Right? They might insist that some things can, some things cannot, and it wouldn't be consistent across the school. So that's something to take note of, okay? Supply side policies can be split into interventionist and market-oriented policies. That's the two major headings. The names themselves are quite instructive as to how they differ. Interventionist involves direct government intervention into the market. Okay, direct intervention into the markets. Market-oriented stance is a bit different. Market-oriented is let's try to improve the supply side of the economy by making the market more perfect, right? Move the market closer to the perfect functioning of what a normal market system would look like. So it's two very different schools of thoughts. This is Keynesian, right, which is very similar to the school of thought for fiscal policy. This is more classical economics, which is where the monetarists come in. So that's where there's a difference in philosophy. Interventionist is the one that's a lot easier to remember because just leaving out number 2 for a while, 1, 3, and 4 corresponds very nicely to the 3 factors of how LRAS will shift. Okay, and the 3 factors are quantity of FOP, right? Quality of FOP, and level of and technological advancement. Correct? So what you will find is that infrastructure will be quantity, manpower policies in terms of labor will be quality, of course with some quantity in the process as well, and technological advancement will correspond to R&D. So I love interventionists. It's always my first go-to when I have to come out on the supply side because it's very easy to remember. They sit very nicely into the 3 types. Now the good news is this, after going through all the demand side policies, right, supply side is the easiest for one very simple reason, there's no mechanism. Every single, so you see, right, I actually compress, everything's very short, right, because everything is just examples based. So when you actually get the supply side policy notes, you will find that everything in there is examples. Okay, so that makes it really easy to study because once you remember the heading, you just need to remember what it does. Generally, you can literally come out examples for yourself in this form. The only catch is this. Supply side policy is very goal driven. Meaning what I tell you that generally is for LRAS and to some extent SRAS. What you will find is that supply side policy is always used as a silver bullet. Supply side policy can solve almost all the problems that demand side policies cannot solve. For example, structural unemployment cannot be solved by demand side policies, can be solved by supply side policies, but here's the thing. You need to pick the correct one that you can tie in with your example to solve structural unemployment, which in this case will be something like this. Education and training for structural unemployment. But here's the thing, if you're trying to use this to explain, let's say, reducing cost push inflation, then your explanation will be different. You wouldn't link it to structural unemployment, you link it to something else. So that's what I mean by that's the catch. So there's not a lot of consistency with what you have to say. You need to slice and dice and change according to what policy, what goal you're trying to fix. So the easy part is that you just need to remember the headings, because you can make out the examples yourself. The slightly tougher part is you need to remember that supply side policies almost always have to be geared towards the macro problem you're trying to fix. Whereas the demand side policies are a lot more consistent in terms of how they work, right? Suddenly something has to change, AB, then you take it from there. But supply side policy kind of, on some level, bypasses the whole process. Right? Not always, but on some level, it bypasses the whole process. Like structural unemployment, right? Don't even need to go through ADAS, there's no link. Right? You can, no matter how you shift your ADAS, structural unemployment will be fixed. Same for frictional unemployment. Right? So that's what I mean by you need to adapt your SSP, supply side policy explanation to the problem you're trying to solve. That's all. But this is actually really, really simple. Okay? So let's go through one by one. The interventionist policies. The first one is manpower policies. So we're talking education and training. Right? So of course, what education and training? It starts from things like schools, right? But beyond schools, you can also talk about vocational training. Right? You can talk about professional development. So what's a very big thing in Singapore for this right now? Skills Future. Right? They came up with the WDA, Workforce Development Agency, right? That is responsible for helping us transform our economy. Right? Because there's a lot of disruption, a lot of economies, a lot of industries, are going down. So the WDA's job is to help to reskill these people, retool, and that's the term that keeps coming out lately, retool, reskill. You want people to learn new skills, to switch jobs mid-career in their 30s, in their 40s, to go into a different industry, into a growing industry, right, to help them make better wages, right, and contribute to a growing segment of the economy. So that's what education and training is. So the way it works is simple. Number one, it improves human capital, which leads to a more efficient workforce. It increases labor productivity, which lowers unit labor cost. Right? And also, it obviously increases the availability of skilled labor, which lowers aggregate COP and increases the quantity of FOP available in the economy as well. So all that I give you here, right, are like what you need for the, as far as keywords go. You just have these few things, that's fine. Right, and obviously this will shift both SRAS and LRAS. Because your workers get more productive, your unit cost of production goes down in aggregate. At the same time, your quality of your labor improves. So the quality of FOP goes up as well. Okay? Okay, next. Increase in the availability of, next one is 3. I'll come back to nationalization in a bit. Grants to encourage R&D, right? So what the government can do is they can spend money, right? Subsidize R&D by companies. And what this will do, of course, it will lead to technological advancement, right? It will raise productivity, it will improve production techniques, it will create new products, and so on. And that will again increase LRAS. So in Singapore, we have this thing called the National Research Foundation, the NRF. I think the last time they announced it was, I think 2016 or 2017. They committed 19 billion to the NRF to do research. Right, so this is also why the government spent a lot of time developing our universities. Because around the world, right, universities are actually a really important part of R&D in the country. Of course, the private sector does it, don't get me wrong, more in some countries than others. So like, of course, US private sector R&D is very strong. Your Facebook, your Google, your Amazon and Apple spend billions a year on R&D. Right, they hire the best scientists, the best computer engineers in-house to do R&D. But at the universities, there's also a lot of R&D going on. Right? They will create new materials, they create like maybe new silicon chips and stuff like that. So government spend a lot of money in Singapore towards like NUS, NTU, SUTD to also finance the research. So you wonder, right, how NUS climbed to Asia #1, it's very simple. The government spent a lot of money to attract a lot of top academics to Singapore to take like tenureship or professorship in NUS, and then they do their research here and they publish here. So most university rankings, right, actually rank based on quality of research, and that is based on number of citations. So all the academic journals are, when you win Nobel Prize, right, you publish stuff. So academic writing actually requires citation, right? You always need to cite. If you make a claim, oh, this A will lead to B, you need to cite. Oh, where do you know that A leads to B? So the more times you're cited means the more important your research is, right? So citations is how like academics sort of rank themselves. So that's how universities are ranked also. They rank the quality of the universities based on the professors and the citations and the research that goes on. So uni is very important anchor, right, of the economy. Even in China, their top universities are fantastic. So a lot of R&D that goes on there. Lastly, infrastructural spending. This is quite easy, right? When you spend on infrastructure such as what? It's just basically capital goods, correct? It can be roads, it can be industrial park, it can be Changi Jewel. That's an example of infrastructure as well. Right? When you spend on infrastructure, you are increasing quantity of FOP, quantity of capital to be specific. And that raises LRAS in the process. Right? More capital, you got more factories, you got more roads, more airports, and all that means more business can occur. Right? More commerce can occur. Lastly, nationalization. See, the easy way to remember nationalization is that instead of the government intervening to do these three things, they can simply nationalize and do any of these three things or all of the three things directly themselves. Make sense? Another angle to help you think about interventionist policies. Actually, if you look at it closely, right? Interventionist policies resembles what we learned in market failure. Education and trading will be other positive externalities. So is R&D. And then infrastructure will fall under public goods. So the government intervenes, right, when the private sector fails to do these things, right, or they're not doing enough of it. So the government comes in, build up all these areas in order to drive potential growth. Because remember, under AD, right, you've got four components. One of the components is I. I is private sector investment. So I actually also contributes to LRAS growth. Right, it contributes to ASI growth. But the problem arises when I is not high enough. Right? There's never a country where it's just purely government doing all these things or the private sector. It's always a mix. So the problem arises and the government needs to step in when the private sector isn't doing enough. Okay? Ken, questions about interventionist supply side policy? Alright, moving on. Market-oriented. So market-oriented is different. Okay, the market-oriented belief is that the free market is the best mechanism through which to allocate resources. So instead of having the government come in to build schools, to start training institutes, to spend money on R&D, the job will be to increase the competitiveness of the markets, increase the information in the markets, and so on. What do I mean by that? Now, for market-oriented, we split it into two parts. You have product markets and labor markets. So there's improving the functioning in product markets, which is just normal markets where goods and services are bought or sold. And then there's one part of labor markets as well. Product markets have three major pillars. Number one is privatization, turning publicly owned companies, state-owned companies, into private companies. This is the opposite of nationalization. So you can see very different approach here. So how is this supposed to increase efficiency in the markets? Very simple. Think back and think about your profit. Think about firms and think about how firms are profit seeking. So if firms are profit seeking, they will drive efficiency, they will increase R&D, they will innovate, etc. Alright? Make sense? Straight out of market structures. So when you go from a publicly owned to a privately owned company, the profit motive will drive them to do all these things. In fact, you can think of it as if the company is privatized, they have an incentive to train their own workers, right? They have an incentive to hire the best, train them, they have the incentive to invest in R&D, to innovate, to get ahead, right? They might even have the incentive to build their own infrastructure. Right? You look at how Amazon and all that, they build their own data centers. Right? Apple built their own office. They don't need people to build these things for them. They go out and build it themselves. Right? Okay, profit-seeking behavior. The second category is pro-competition policies. This is actually very easy. It's very similar to what you learn, right, for government intervention to reduce market power. So there's literally nothing new in this list, except maybe the free trade one, right? So it's like literally what you learn in market structure, or what do you do when there's too much monopoly power? Those are the solutions, right? Anti-competition regulation, the first one. Tougher competition regimes, greater supervision and reduction of anti-competitive behavior and mergers, right? So in the US, you have the Free Trade Commission, the FTC. In Singapore, it's the Competition Commission of Singapore, I think it's CCS. Competition Commission of Singapore. They regulate firm behavior, right? You cannot collude to set prices. Any anti-competitive mergers cannot happen. For example, Singtel cannot merge with Starhub. They never allow that, right? Because that will hurt consumers. They have too much pricing power. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is remove barriers to entry. Simple, right? You lower barriers to entry, you encourage more firms to enter, you increase competition. So this part, right, a lot of leveraging on your firm's knowledge, it will make your life a lot easier. So you've learned that, you can recycle it here. The good news is, because you're talking about firms in a macro context, you don't need to be as rigorous in terms of your keywords. You just need the core ideas. And the core idea has to do with this, profit-seeking behavior, right? With more competition will lead to firms to compete, innovate, make better products, lower prices, reap EOS, cut costs, increase efficiency, do R&D, all of those things. So straight out of the firm's playbook, that makes your life a bit easier because you don't have to study from scratch. Any example you cite from there will work. Okay, last one is, we haven't really learned this because we haven't done free trade, but the idea is simple, which is you promote more trade between countries, right? More trade means more competition. Because not only are you competing domestically now, you're competing in foreign companies. So that should make it better, right? It motivates you to innovate, to cut costs, to be more efficient, so on and so forth. Lastly, C, encourage small business startups and promoting enterprises, right? So like Singapore has a reputation of being one of the easiest countries in the world to start a company. You can do it in a day. So things like that useful. Why? You encourage small companies to start up, you encourage entrepreneurship. What does that entail? Right? What you got to do is to remember that companies like Apple, Google, Amazon, they all started in a garage. They all started small, one-man team, two-man team, 5 people, 4 people, and they grew to multi-billion-dollar companies. A lot of startups die, obviously. But without a startup culture, you will never have the opportunity for these big companies to arise. Right? So the key is when you encourage small business startups, they tend to be more, well, they tend to be even more profit-seeking. They tend to be more innovative. They tend to be more efficient. So you see, right, actually across these 3 things, we just keep repeating the same thing and same thing over and over again, right? Just from different triggers. Different causes, different angles, different reasons, but all the same outcome. Which is that ultimately, if you increase the amount of competition and profit motive in the market, you will encourage more innovation, more efficiency, more R&D, right? Even more training of workers and so on. And all of these things will contribute to raising SRAS because you lower aggregate cost of production. Okay, let me teach you something extra. Let's say your notes tell you that all these things can contribute to LRAS growth also. Then how? Then very simple. You link what we said here about the profit-seeking behavior to everything up there. You link why profit-seeking will lead to education and training. Why will it lead to infrastructural spending? Why it will lead to R&D? Quite simple, right? So obviously R&D is the obvious one. You can use a lot of examples. Your Apples, your Amazons, and your Googles and all that. Right? They spend billions of dollars a year hiring people, coming together, trying to solve technological problems. Right? Infrastructure is really easy as well. Again, the tech companies come to mind. They build data centers, right? They build their own facilities. You look at Apple, if I'm not mistaken, because their new campus is in the middle of nowhere, they probably build a road leading into the campus anyway, so that's infrastructure. Right? Amazon building warehouses all over the countries, These are all infrastructure, this is all capital expenses. Education and training is the one that's probably a bit tricky. But what you probably don't realize is that actually, if you think that your studying stops after uni, you're wrong. Your studying just becomes harder after uni. Because you got to work and you got to learn your job on the fly. Right? So, simple things like, let's say, management training programs. I don't know if you know what those are. Management associate programs, management training programs are when the MNCs or the large companies like even DBS, they hire you, they rotate you across different divisions, right? Like 6 months per posting, and then after 3 years, you decide where you want to stay, and then they'll put you permanently in the department and they'll groom you for management. That's why it's called a management training program, management associate program. So actually a lot of top companies, right, when you go in, you don't work immediately. There's a whole job rotation process, there's a whole training process, they send you for a 3-month course. If you join one of the bigger banks, like the American banks, you join them here, they will send you to the US for 3 months for training before you come back and start work. So it's not uncommon, right? Then companies can also pay for your MBA, right, your Masters in Business Administration, if you want to promote you to senior management. So a lot of these things, or even other kind of professional qualifications, yeah, the accountant, your company will pay for you to do your accounting course. Right, so private companies can also invest in education and training for their people. Why? So the question is why, right? Why does it make sense to do all the training? Why don't you just hire people that you want? So first of all, it could be because the job market is very competitive. Right? Everyone is fighting for the most competitive candidates. So if you can't find people that you want, sometimes you're forced to train them from scratch. Right? Maybe you have a limited budget. You can't hire like the top guy. So you hire someone and then you train them up so that they can do the job for you. Right? Other reasons is simply because some jobs you just cannot learn while you're in school. Right? 50% of what you learn in school is going to be useless. So you go to work, they need to teach you fresh skills and then they help you upgrade your skills in the process. So it's really not uncommon. Right? People go for courses every year. If you're in the government, it's even more frequent than that. You can go for a course like every 6 months. They'll go on course, they'll learn something new, and so on. So private companies actually do it also. But the biggest impetus is when they face competition and they want to get an edge, they need to invest in their people to be better than the other companies. Then they'll be inclined to have education and training. Which is where all these things come in, because all these things promote the profit motive and the competition. And lastly, labor markets. Okay, 4 things, but actually quite easy things to recall. The first one is reducing the power of trade unions. Okay, reducing the power of trade unions. You know what trade unions are? Unions represent workers to negotiate with employers. The problem is that with unions, they can distort the true compensation. Meaning because they got bargaining power, they can require companies to compensate workers beyond what's fair, right? Beyond what reflects their productivity. Then of course, if you are a country that's very union heavy, then on aggregate that will translate to higher aggregate cost of production. So doing okay, Asia is doing fantastic, right? But Europe is down in the slumps. Right? Their strongest economy, which is like Germany, grows at like 2% a year. You don't even need to think about Italy and Spain and Holland and Portugal and whatnot. Okay, so the first one is reducing power of trade unions, reduces wage inflation, but it doesn't just have to be wages. Other forms of compensation, sick leave, excessive amount of like breaks and all that can also raise costs unreasonably for companies. Second one, income policies. Right, to keep wage growth in line with productivity growth. We talked about this before, right? I told you that actually in an ideal world, wage growth will track productivity growth, such that there will be no change in SRAS, right? Basically when companies pay higher wages to workers. The problem arises when wage growth outstrips productivity growth. So if you actually put in income policies that keep wage growth in line with productivity growth, it's likely to look something like abolishment of minimum wage. Right, because minimum wage doesn't necessarily reflect the productivity of each worker. Right, you might be getting paid more arbitrarily than what you are actually contributing to the company. Right, so that's not fair, huh? It's not due to market forces. It was an arbitrarily set price floor. So income policy. So these two can group together. The whole point is you want to make sure wages are due to DDSS. But this too distorts the demand and supply. It's not a free market. So again, this is in line. See, that's why it's called a market-oriented policy. our job is to make sure that demand and supply guides wages. Right, so whatever the wages is should reflect market demand and supply. And that should benefit SRAS. Okay? Then C and D goes together. C and D is very easy to remember. Okay? One side is about tax. One side is about transfer payments. So the first one is about income tax. Okay, primarily. The second one is transfer payments. Cuts in social welfare programs and all that. Okay? So the way it works is very simple. On the LRAS front, it primarily has to do with increase in quantity of labor. Because remember, labor force is not equal to population. The people that are bumming around at home, living off government, not doing anything, are not part of the labor force. So if we can get them off their ass and go to work, then that increases the labor force, increases the labor participation rate. Make sense? And to do that, this is a very effective two-pronged approach. You cut taxes to increase your marginal income. Correct? I cut taxes, every dollar you earn, you get to retain more. So that's the incentive, that's the carrot. The stick is that I cut social welfare programs so that you will be more desperate to get a job. You can't live off the government because that's not enough. Then you get off your ass and you go find a job. And then you go to work. Right? So that contributes to the labor force. And that will increase the quantity of labor, the LRAS will rise in that process. Okay? Give you one side tip. I will revisit this again with you, but this too, right, very useful for frictional unemployment. Can see how? Can see why, right? You know how it helps frictional unemployment? It reduces your reservation wage. Okay? It reduces your reservation wage. It reduces the wage that you need to accept a job, which basically will cut your search time. You'll be more inclined to say yes more quickly. It reduces the rate of frictional unemployment. Okay, before I move on to limitations and effects, a couple of things. Okay, number one, market-oriented policies, this list is far from encompassing. Okay? The thing to keep in mind is this, because market-oriented policies is such a broad categorization, there's a lot of things that can potentially be market-oriented that I cannot put here. So why am I telling you this? For one very practical reason. When you go to CSQ, right, one of the biggest struggles you will have when you throw in policies is that you cannot recognize what the policy is. That's a big problem, because these are all real life stuff. Then what you must understand is, right, these things happens in our life all the time. Parliament is talking about it all the time, but no one goes around labeling it like, oh, the government just announced a supply side policy. All they tell you is that, oh, government is doing Changi Jewel. Government is building Thomson Line, Downtown Line, and they're expanding LRT line. They're building a round island bicycle cycling park. They're developing the new Tengah area into a housing district and all that. Those are all supply side policies, but they never say it. Government create job fairs, right, to help people get re-employed. That's a market-oriented supply side policy. Why? Because when the government do job fairs, they're improving information. One of the reasons why the market fails, right? These are all, if you look closely, these are all instances where there's market failures and market distortions. So one way the market fails is also that there's informational imperfection, right? Informational asymmetry. So when the government create job fairs and they allow employers and employees to match, they're improving information. So that can be regarded as a market-oriented supply side policy. Especially if it's in the form of a job portal. Right, maybe you might argue a government job fair is interventionist. Fine. But what about a government job portal? Right? They are helping to facilitate the market to interact with each other, that's all. So my point is, when it comes to SSP, your approach has to be very different from the three other policies. The three other policies are very rigid. There's a very rigid set of mechanisms, there's a very rigid set of pros and cons. Supply side policy, the first challenge is that the list is not fixed. Even from school to school, they will vary what they give you. The good thing is interventions is quite standard. It's like three things. Market oriented is the one that can have a lot of variation. So you need to keep your eyes peeled. There are things that are not here that can be considered market-oriented SSP as well. So especially for CSQ, you need to keep your eyes peeled for that. That's number one. Number two, the way to use supply-side policies is very different from demand-side policy. Because demand side policy, almost every policy goes through the ADAS process. You follow what I mean? That is, everything goes through AD shift, GPL and MY change, then link to goals. SSP has two sides. Okay, you got to write this down. SSP has the ADAS side, which is things like potential growth, cost push inflation, cyclical unemployment. They will still go through ADAS. So there's the ADAS side of SSP, and there's a non-ADAS side that you need to be very sensitive to, such as structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, maybe financial account, some aspects of current account. You will have to pay attention to. So SSP, not everything will go through ADAS, and I cannot give you the whole list now. I'll be giving you along the way. I have other notes that will help you stitch your policies together with goals. I'll do essays with you along the way to show you how to link it. But let's give you a heads up first. Right? SSP, very fluid. It's good for some people that are better at elaborating their own words. It's more challenging for some people that finds it hard to do their own elaboration. Right, but basically, you need to split your SSP knowledge into two. How do I use this through the ADAS mechanism? How do I use this through the non-ADAS route? Okay? And lastly is, you really need examples of SSP. So if you struggle with coming up with examples yourself, right, then you better pre-memorize when you go into the exam. So my trick is, always memorize interventions first. That's the easiest. Because it goes back to the quantity of FOP, quality of FOP, technological one. The one that people struggle with is market-oriented. That's why I give you a hierarchy, right? Market-oriented, product, labor, right? Product side, three aspects: privatization, pro-competition, startups. You need to organize your information like that. Then it helps you remember better. Then labor got four, but I told you group 2 and 2, right? Trade unions and minimum wage kind of goes together, right? So that's the first group, A and B. Trade union, minimum wage. The other side is the benefits and taxes side. Taxes, transfer payments. Right, so one memory technique that's very useful when it comes to social science is you try to remember things in pairs, in opposite pairs. So you remember one thing, you actually are remembering two things in the process. Okay, let's wrap up. As we go along and we do questions, you will understand what I mean by SSP, the silver bullet. Right? If you think about what we have learned so far, you should already realize that if you break down all your goals, right, demand side policies will be very good at doing some stuff, and SSP will be great at doing the rest. Give us a good example. You talk about economic growth. Demand side policy can never fix potential growth. Right? So that's where supply side comes in. So never, you will almost never have an essay that you don't need supply side policy. Very rarely, sometimes off chance they give 15 marks, they ask you to compare two demand side policies. That happens. But very, 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 very rare. And it's for this reason. Because SSP makes up for whatever demand side policy cannot cover. So you almost always need it. Okay? So although I say it's a silver bullet, it's great at solving a lot of problems, but these two are very major weaknesses. And the first one is that supply side policies take way too long. If you have a problem now, even cost push inflation, you cannot depend on supply side policy to fix it. It takes too long. Right? Lately, of course, I think you know there's been a lot of debate about the education system. But one thing is very true that about why education is very challenging is this. If you think about it, right, when you educate a primary school kid today, you're preparing them for a workforce 20 years down the road. Right, for the boys, by the time you finish army and uni, you go to work when you're 25. You start primary school when you're 7, that's 18 years. So the question is, how do you know what the future is supposed to look like? And how do you prepare people for that? But that's just an illustration of the education thing, right? Even for professional courses, they take at least 1 to 2 years. So it's never an immediate solution. Infrastructure is worse. I think Jewel took 4 or 5 years to build. Right? Thomson line, all your circle lines and all that, they take like 5-6 years to build the whole thing out. 7 years, right? So the biggest weakness for supply side policies first is time lag. The time lag is massive because all of these things take a really long time. Alright, even things like abolishing minimum wage, that's not going to be overnight. There's going to be a lot of politicking, there's going to be a lot of lobbying, a lot of debates in parliament, right? Reducing power of trade unions also will have a lot of pushback. So none of these things are easy to do. Next, long gestation period, standard number one. Long gestation period means, so first of all, the thing itself takes very long, right? And second, oh wait, sorry, it's a repeat, let's go to number two. Uncertainty, right? Uncertainty. So what's uncertainty? If you think about all your supply side policies, there's no guarantee that they will work. For example, R&D, right? I always like to tell the story of China. There's two stories here. One is, I think at least up to 2 or 3 years ago, China makes a lot of like ballpoint pens, right? So a lot of the pens that you buy are going to be made in China, right? Because they're really, really cheap. But here's the thing: they can't make them. You know the ball, you know the most pens, right? Yeah, they can't make the nib because the ball is very small, and the ball must always be perfectly spherical for it to spin to pick up ink for you to write. You get what I mean? That's how a ballpoint pen works. Right? The ball is spinning, it's picking up ink, and then it allows you to write. If the hole is too big, then all the ink will come out. Right? If it's not smooth enough, the ball will spin and you can't write. So China, up to a few years ago, I think still true now, they can't make the nib. They don't have the technology for it. And you think about it, it's nuts because China can do a lot of things. They even have their own airline now. But they couldn't figure out how to do the ballpoint tip. So I think much of it is still imported from Japan. That's one example. The other example is... Huh?
They can do it now, they celebrated it.
Ah, right. When was that?
Like last year.
Yeah, so I got the information article like 3 or 4 years ago. Right, so at the time they still cannot. Then the more recent and relevant example is this. You know US and China got a trade fight and all that, right? You all know that US wanted to like threaten they have this company called ZTE. They wanted to ban ZTE from buying I think semiconductor chips from US. And they will die, right? They can't buy it because they are a phone maker. So China has spent like the last 30 odd years trying to develop their own silicon chip manufacturing facilities. They still can't do it. Right? They still have to depend on Japan, Korea, and US for their silicon chips because their companies are just way better and their technology is better and their chips are better. So that's a very good example, which is R&D, no guaranteed outcomes. If it's guaranteed outcomes, then it's too easy. Every company can do it. Right? Why did Apple come out with the iPhone first? Right? So R&D, not guaranteed outcome. Not everyone can do just because they put the hours and the manpower into it. Same for education and training. Doesn't mean you educate and train, your worker quality will improve. It's not that simple. Right? It's not even that simple to carry on the program over an extended period of time. Infrastructure doesn't mean you build, means it will be useful, means it will contribute to the capital stock. So China also had an example. They built tons of capital, but you heard about their ghost capitals. Right? Their ghost towns where they build roads and highways and all that and no one uses it. So that doesn't really add to productive capacity because it's not productive at all. Right? They are building in areas where it's waste. Right? Because it's ultimately government directed or it's not free market. Right? Indeterminate outcomes. So two major things. These two are the two major weaknesses of supply side policy. They take too long, and they might not necessarily give you the outcome that you want. There's no guarantee. Lastly, effects of government budget. This is more interventionist. Okay? This is more interventionist. Cost market oriented is free. So that should give you a clue. If you have CSQ, you have a context, you have to weigh, should I use interventionist or market oriented? One condition will be your government got money. Right? If the government is in a huge fiscal deficit, then interventionist policy is out. You're going to use market oriented. Okay?
Wait, which one?
This one, number 3. 3 is only relevant to interventionists because only interventionists involve spending. Market oriented doesn't involve spending at all. Okay, very briefly, the effects are here. I'll have a more detailed one with you later on. So basically, supply side policy great for growth, right? Because you need it for potential growth. It's great for price as well, GPL. It's great for inflation. It can reduce structural and frictional unemployment, as I told you. And lastly, it can improve BOP. Now this one we'll go through an essay on this, because this is quite important. How to improve BOP using supply side policies. Ken? Questions? Now, go read page 15. And then we are done for this set of notes. they're also not just reactive. There's a base amount of spending that will go on every single year, base amount of taxes that will go on every single year. So that's what I mean by the permanent fixture. Where fiscal policy could vary is that there's an ad hoc component. If something goes wrong, they can reactively adjust fiscal policy to try to combat that issue. For example, in 2008, 2009, no one started 2008 thinking that the world's economy will crash. Right? So their budget will be certain things, then they realize, oh shit, the economy is going to die. Then they do something new in the latter half of the year. Okay, that's what I mean by that. Fiscal policy actually primarily, right, is best used for growth and employment because of how direct it is. If I raise G, I know for a fact that there will be growth and there will be jobs. Agree? Central bank, monetary policy, okay, primarily used to control inflation. Why? Inflation is sudden and inflation requires you to be surgical to combat. You got what I mean by that? You know what I mean by being surgical? For example, you see, if you use fiscal policy to combat inflation, right? So let's say you think this year, AD will be very strong. So I scrap the Chinese Road project. Let's say it's 4 billion. Singapore's GDP is only about 300 billion a year. I scrap the Jewel project 4 billion as 1% of GDP. That's massive. Okay, that's massive. Just need to remember that every dollar of GDP in the economy represents a dollar of income for someone. You shave 4 billion in income out of your economy, right? That means households are losing $4 billion a year. That's not a non-trivial sum. Right? So that makes fiscal policy very lumpy. When I cannot cut half of Jewel, right? The Jewel, instead of the waterfall like that, I just do half a waterfall. I can't do that. Right? I can't have half the airport runway. Like, I don't want to spend so much, so my runway is half the normal length. You have to figure out how to land the plane. Right? You can't do that. But monetary policy is very surgical. You can raise interest rates by 0.25%, by 0.1%, 0.15%. You can do the same thing for your currency. You can appreciate your currency by 1%. Half a percent, 0.1%, you can be very surgical and you can be very fast. So central banks are great for combating inflation because inflation can arise suddenly, right? Out of the blue, abruptly. They can react quickly and they can do it surgically. Now remember what I always teach you. When we try to combat inflation, we're trying to lower the rate of growth. We want growth, but we're going to lower the rate of growth. So surgical is important. Because if you're not surgical, the chances that you will cause a recession becomes very high. Just like if the government scrapped the Jewel project, don't forget that you scrap the Jewel project is one thing. But if those contractors earn 4 billion less, they'll buy less house that year, they'll renovate less houses, they'll buy less cars, there's a multiplier effect, right? They'll go less to restaurants, so there'll be a knock-on effect on your economy. So being surgical in combating inflation is actually really important. But for growth, it's very simple. Growth, your objective is, I just want to grow. So when I want to spend, I just spend and I just push growth and employment in the process. So you need to understand their rules. So although when you write essays, don't get me wrong, when you write essays, you're supposed to write all of them. What I'm teaching you here is for evaluation. So that you know actually which policy is truly the best in reality. That will make your essay way better. Because you know how to angle it. Okay? So I told you the annual one, the central banks, okay, I told you the truths, monetary policy is discretionary. Okay, so monetary policy, discretionary, no tinkering needed means Federal Reserve meets 6 or 8 times a year, I can't remember. US Federal Reserve 6 or 8 times a year. MAS is 4 to 6 times, I can't remember. But basically what they do is they meet every quarterly or like every time they meet, they just sit down, review how's the economy, blah blah blah. They might not do anything half the time. Right, so they won't change the economy all the time. There's no budget. It's just this year the economy is like what? Right, this is the projection. Here's our exchange rate. I think it's okay. Let's keep it there. This is how it works. US is a bit more sophisticated. There's this thing called a dot plot. Very interesting. Okay, dot plot is when the Federal Reserve, right? They got I think 16 or 18 of them in the committee. So every time they sit down, right, they will decide, where do I think interest rates should be? Right, in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, based on where they think the economy is going to be and how the economy is going to be. So the dot plot just shows all the dots representing different votes of where interest rates should be and so on. So that's how the Federal Reserves do their thing. But again, the policy might stay unchanged for an extended period of time. if the economy is doing okay or there's no need for change. So that's where it differs from fiscal policy. There's a steady state, but fiscal policy every year you need to come out with something. Okay, central bank, inflation, I told you, cornerstone economic stability. We talked about this, right? I always tell you inflation as a goal itself has no value. Its value is a backdrop. Backdrop for growth and employment. Okay? Relevance of conflicts. Okay. This is important, but I'll revisit it. So the thing is, you need to remember, you're gonna see this a lot. You're gonna see this thing called trade-offs. You might even have seen it already. They love to ask this question. Right, what are the trade-offs when you do this? Discuss how trade-offs complicate economic policy, decision making. You need to remember this. Trade-offs doesn't come from what macro goal you choose to solve. Trade-off comes from what policy you choose to use. The trade-off will be very different when you use fiscal versus exchange rate to combat inflation. Follow? How? I will show you. I need to show you through essays. You cannot visualize all the scenarios. So macro essay analysis is super important. We've got tons coming. Right? I'm just giving you an illustration. Right? When you use fiscal or you use exchange rate policy, your trade-off will look very different. Okay? I give you a simple example. I give you an even simpler example. I use fiscal policy to pursue growth, and I use exchange rate policy to pursue growth. The trade-off is very different. When I use fiscal policy to achieve growth, my current account will worsen. If I use exchange rate policy to achieve growth, my current account will improve. You know why? When I depreciate to boost my economy, my X minus M will rise. Then I'll get growth, right? So my current account improves as I get economic growth. But if you go to CGI, when income rise, because of MPM, you buy more imports. So your current account worsens when you grow through fiscal, but improves when you grow through exchange rate. You see the nuances? That's where trade-offs come in. That's where trade-off matter. But there's so many permutations, I can't give you all of them now. I'll show you over time, I'll give you essays. But you need to be aware that these things are there. And now all sound very confusing, but when you give the essay structure, it will be easy. Okay. So what I'm saying is the central bank cannot be cavalier because what they do will always have impacts on other sides of the economy. Supply side policy is implicitly embedded in the economy, so what I was telling you just now is every day you open a newspaper, right, almost every day got supply side policy. Right? It's just there. They just don't call it supply side policy, but it's there. The government is always doing new things. Okay? So it's not as ad hoc as you think, it's always there. I'm teaching you how to understand the context of these policies. So day to day, year to year, the government always has fiscal, always has supply side one. Right? The monetary is the only one that's a bit more ad hoc. And why you need to have supply side ongoing very simple. What's the biggest limitation I told you? Time lag. Right now you wait for the problem to arise to use supply side policy, you're screwed. So you better make sure there's an ongoing effort to boost potential growth, ongoing effort to boost LRAS so that you don't get demand pull inflation. That must be ongoing. You cannot wait. You need to keep building up capacity. Okay? What else? I give you an example here, the CFD. This is quite useful. This didn't exist until like 3 or 4 years ago. So they actually form a committee, right? Because they understand our economic model is under threat. So that's why they convene the CFE, they chart the plan for Singapore's economy. Oh, last time we depend on oil and gas and manufacturing and all that. What should we do in the future? That's what the CFE is trying to do. Okay, then I repeated again. I told you, actually the challenge is supply side policies don't always work. There's no guarantee that you will get what you want to get, right, as a result of that. So in totality, fiscal and supply side policies go hand in hand, controlled by the government, substantial overlap. Nonetheless, not all fiscal policy has supply side effects. Okay. Think about something. Fiscal and supply side actually can overlap. If you overlap it, the things that you do will raise AD and AS at the same time. Okay, I'll show you how when we do essays. This is something for evaluation also. It's called demand-oriented supply side policies or supply-oriented demand side policy. Simple example, if the government build a school today, G will go up, but AS will go up also. That will be a good example. Okay, so the role, if you think about all the pieces, very simple. Fiscal, always there. Blunt, powerful, effective, with some limitations. Monetary, nimble, fast, primarily focused on inflation. right? Used on an ad hoc basis. And then lastly, you've got supply side policy, again, almost always there. It's permanent. You've got to tweak it because it's slow. And your outcomes are indeterminate. Okay? Questions? If not, please bring this back next week when I see you, because you probably need it for whatever exercise we're going to do, for you to refer to. Okay?